Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Heart-Centered Therapist podcast. I'm Cindy Gozansky, your host, and today I am really delighted and honored to bring you my guest. Her name is Jodie Gale, and she is from Sydney, Australia. So Jodie got up and met with me at 5:30 in the morning on a Saturday just to share with my listeners her wisdom. So I'm super grateful to Jodie. Let me tell you a little about her. Jodie Gale, MA, is the founder of the Psychosynthesis Centre for Therapists, Trauma Warriors, the Soul Sessions with Jodie Gale podcast, and Jodie Gale Soul-Centered Therapy for Women. She is a clinical supervisor, private practice business coach, trainer, facilitator, and an psycho-spiritual registered clinical psychotherapist on the northern beaches of Sydney, Australia, and online. Jodie has over 20 years of experience in private pay, private practice, and has built two thriving practices, one in London and one at home in Sydney, Australia. Jodie is passionate about helping therapists blog their way to private practice success. She is known as the blogging expert in the therapy world. So if you haven't met Jodie, welcome to our show. Hello, Jodie.
Hi, good morning. Oh, it's morning my time. How are you?
Good. Yes, it's late afternoon my time, so I love to have an international show today. I love to start by asking my guest, since this is called the Heart-Centered Therapist podcast, what
Mm.
does being a heart-centered therapist mean to you?
Yeah, I really loved this question because the type of therapy that I studied, so I studied back in the UK. I lived over there for about 15 years. I studied psychosyntheses and it has sort of different bylines. So one of them is psychosyntheses, the therapy with the soul, and the other one is a psychotherapy of love. So when I read about heart driven, I went to thinking about most of our client concerns are centered around love or lack thereof. So, being heart centered to me means that we must love our clients to bits. And I always have this really strong reaction when I see people in Facebook groups have that sort of that model where they've been trained at a college where it says you can't love your clients. And I think, oh my goodness, how is this person going to heal if we don't love them? So to me, that's what being heart driven means. And I think the show Stutz, there was a lot of controversy around that. I love you, Jonah. I love you, Stutz. And everyone was up in arms about it. And I'm thinking, oh, at last, someone's finally coming clean about a therapist loving their patient. So yeah, that's what it means to me.
Yes, absolutely. And I did not plant you here, but people who know me know that I say the same thing, that it's so important
Oh,
to love our clients. I really believe that. I share that with my student interns and
mm,
people I work with. I think it's super important. And I did read your blog on Stutz. It's
ah,
amazing. So we can put a link to that in the show notes too. But yes, that was really eye-opening. And I think it did a lot for therapists to have a little bit more like real personality and personhood and heart and soul come through.
oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's great. I believe in leading with love as part of the heart-centered therapist model. So we're right aligned.
We
So
are.
yeah, we are aligned. Um, Psychosynthesis is not as common, I don't think, here in the United States. And so
Mm.
know a little bit about what is this approach, psychosynthesis. I've heard you describe it as the eco-soma social psycho-spiritual model for working with growth, transformation, crises, and trauma.
Mm. Yeah, so we were just chatting before we started, and I mentioned that one of our colleagues, Nicole Burgess, was trained in psychosynthesis in the US, and I think Assagioli was a Florentine, and he's the founder of Psychosynthesis. There's sort of two cohorts. There was the British cohort, and then there was the Californian cohort. And so, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing this correctly, Palo Alto?
Yeah.
Somewhere there was quite a big cohort. So there is psychosynthesis training in the US. It has tended more towards a coaching model these days. So what we would call, and I know there's going to be a whole heap of therapists out there freaking out when I say this, it's a psychotherapeutic coaching model. So what that means is that I think because of the pathologization of everyday concerns, they tend more towards a coaching model than a therapy model over there. Not always, but it's more of a positive psychology model. So what it is that Assagioli, I think he trained under Freud, and he felt that psychoanalysis was useful but limited. And he was Jewish, and so what he did was he incorporated his spirituality, so the Kabbalah, into psychotherapy very early on, so back in around 1910. And then he included Buddhism, indigenous psychology, and so it became known as a mix of, I think he was actually a neurologist, so a mix of science and spirituality. And he was determined to have psychosynthesis be seen as a legitimate scientific model. And so at a recent conference here in Australia, I saw Dan Siegel speak about, I hate this word, but he says we, so it's me and we. And I thought, yeah. And so I thought, finally, science is starting to catch up if Dan Siegel's talking about it. So 100 years later. But Assagioli used to basically, I think it was the first truly holistic model, because he used to bring all the other therapies into his model. And that's why when we say ecosomas, social, we're really drawing on, I think, the best of Western psychology and Eastern spirituality. So that's, and over the years, there's a couple of us who have really moved towards ecotherapy, which I did in the pandemic. We had a couple of really lengthy lockdowns here. I think the last one was 20 weeks, and I went through a existential crisis, dark night of the soul, and found myself studying ecotherapy for the year and just going and sitting in the dark woods and really working, like, when is this pandemic going to end? Are we all going to die? When's my existential crisis going to end? And luckily, I felt, thank goodness, I'd been trained in a psychospiritual psychotherapy, because I understood what was happening. Most people probably would have gone and been medicated for depression or something like that. For me, it was a spiritual crisis stroke awakening, and we're trained to work with these presentations without pathologizing them. So yeah, that's psychosynthesis in a nutshell.
Yes. Wow. Thank you for that really deep and fascinating introduction to it. I love the way it integrates all of these approaches, like you said, the Eastern and the Western, and the spirituality as well, and that's such a foundation, and that, sharing with us even vulnerably your own personal struggle and having your own spiritual dark night of the soul, and choosing to this kind of self-growth way through it, which was, not easy. Instead, you could have been treated with medication or self-medicate, or, done any number of the other things that the rest of us did, gain weight or
I did that too.
but having that foundation is so important, especially as therapists, and use what we do also with ourselves. And that's
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah. Wow. So there's a lot of emphasis then in psychosynthesis on personal growth and self-realization, that positive psychology, and less on pathology.
Oh, absolutely. And I think one of the problems you have in the US is insurance and the need to diagnose. And, my training was an 8-year depth psychotherapy training. I guess it's most aligned to like a Jungian analyst training, but from Jung was also a colleague of Assagioli, but, more of an emphasis on that transpersonal aspect. But pause. I forget what I was going to say there. What was the question you asked?
That this was more focused on the positive psychology versus pathology.
Yeah, that's right. Let me just think again. Early morning brain freeze. Yeah, so in the US, because of insurance, where people have to diagnose and give people some kind of mental illness or mental disorder, in psychosynthesis we don't do that. We would say, for example, I'm sort of thinking I'm trained to recognise borderline personality disorder, but we don't see it like that. We would see that as a result of trauma, and so we don't label people with disorders. We would actually ask, and my niche actually is eating disorders. I don't even like that word. I see eating disorders as a very creative way to manage early childhood trauma. And so why are we pathologizing this person with some disorder or disease? So, we're always looking for what is this, in inverted commas, disorder calling for us to awaken to in ourselves. So this dark night of the soul, for example, you could have seen it as a depression, but for me it was, what is this actually calling for me to awaken to? And for me, I was living I made a collage card where I had this woman, not with one hair clip in, but she had like 50 in her hair. And so I was living a very unconscious life, like too much stuff, too many things, too much travel without thinking about the environment. And so for me, the whole pandemic was a call to awaken to, let's try and live a little bit differently so we don't completely stuff up this planet.
Yes, right. Kind of simplifying yourself and the environment and
Yeah.
of alignment. Yes.
Yeah, and it's interesting because at the beginning of the of my studying nature therapy throughout that time, it was all about what can nature do for me? If I go to nature, what can I get out of this? By the end of my training, which took a whole year, I was like, oh, what can I do for the planet? So it had completely sort of turned on its head.
Right. Yeah. And I'm just still going back to that image that came to you of the woman with the 50 hair clips.
Yep.
And you have, when we first got on, you have beautiful hair and it's all in one like long bun on the top of your head. That's like sort of encapsulate like you got to this different place.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I do love a good bun.
Well, not coming from the psychosynthesis model, but it's been a firm believer, at least the way I work, that the spiritual context is important and spirituality is important.
Mm.
Just assess whether that matters or is meaningful to the client. And I guess I'd wonder, since you work with this, like what happens if we neglect to understand and include a spiritual context in our work?
Oh, look, I'll get to our work, but I just think in terms of look at what's happening in the world at the moment. And I think when we neglect spirituality, and I don't mean necessarily religion, although it could be for some, um, I think the planet is suffering with spiritual bankruptcy, and we're filling this bankruptcy with stuff and addiction and whatever else we're doing, um, you know, conspiracy theories, whatever it is, it's being filled because of this void. And, we don't. If a client will read my website, so they will see that I do talk about spirituality on there. But actually, 10 years ago, I wouldn't mention the word soul on my. It was a bit woo-woo still, but in the last 10 years, it's come such a long way. And, like I'm talking about, for some people it could be a spiritual practice. For other people it could be religion. I live in Australia, so for Indigenous people it could mean connecting with the land. Um, and even if I don't bring spirituality into the therapy, I'm always holding that as the context for my work. So how do I help this person live a more soulful life? And I don't mean religious soulful life. I just mean a juicy, soulful, connected life. And yeah, because some people, freak out at the word spirituality, or they've had spiritual abuse or religious abuse. So you obviously need to be very careful in languaging around all that stuff. So yeah, I think and also you have therapists say I work holistically, and then there's no mention of spirituality. And I think, well, that's not holistic. You're missing a huge chunk of um, someone's life. And then if we go to the other end of symptoms and back to that pathologizing, most therapists, it's the most recognized book on the planet for therapists, and that's Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning, finding the value, meaning, and purpose out of our symptoms. So, for me with my eating disorder, I don't have any angst left around that. I think, thank goodness I had that. It probably saved my life. It probably saved my life. So, and now I've had a very, very good career out of it, with lived experience. So that's another way of bringing the spiritual element in, that our symptoms have meaning.
Yes, right. Meaning and purpose, and then that healing launched you into a career where you can help others from your own lived experience and education and wisdom, and it's really quite a gift.
Absolutely. And I really believe that. The other major issue I've had in life was infertility. And I think, when people go through not being able to conceive, I think it was like 7 years for my husband and I, it's horrendous, and it's the end of the world. And now we're parents through foster care to adopt. And I think, oh, thank goodness for infertility, because I wouldn't have these amazing children. But I mean, if you would have said that to me while I was going through it, I probably would have punched you in the head or something. But now it's like, okay, I get it now.
Yes. Wow. Right. And so again, that loss created this huge blessing in your life. That sounds,
Absolutely.
yeah, so amazing. And I was just actually doing group supervision with my team of therapists, and we were talking about loss, and and I was like, loss is everywhere. Like you just
Oh,
keep going and keep that as a thread, a lens when you're working with your clients, because if somebody even is diagnosed with like type 1 diabetes, I said, hey,
mm,
loss. When was she diagnosed? Well, what happened in her life then, right?
absolutely. And I think as a depth psychotherapist, what I'm working with, um, not the symptoms so much, but that loss of self, and that this person experienced early in their life. So yeah, it's the basis for a lot of our work, most of our work. So
Yes. Well, I love that focus on the self and the soul, and it sounds like a really fascinating approach, and we will definitely link to your website so people can find out more, because I know you also teach some training modules on psychosynthesis.
I do, and I'm just getting things up online. And of course, every time you go to create something as a business owner, something happens, like the pandemic, or like your teenage daughter wanting to move high schools. And so I'm a little bit behind, but I will get there.
I can relate more than you even know to that. So I'd like for us to jump into the really the headliner of our conversation
Hmm.
today, which is about your expertise as a blogger and blogging your way to private practice success.
Hmm.
So we're going to talk about the benefits of blogging, the intricacies of being a therapist who's
Yeah.
practicing, blogging, and I'd just love for you to start with your story of like, how did you get started blogging? And then we can dive into the benefits and all of the tips you have for us.
Sure. So yeah, I think when was it? It was just after our kids came to us. So that was 2012. You know, when kids are little, they have that 2 hours in the day where they have sleep time, and then for me it was quiet time. I used to put a Disney movie on every day, so I could have that sort of 2 hours of downtime for myself, I think. But back then in Australia, we had the medical model, not quite as, yeah, it probably is the same as the US. We don't so much have insurance here, but we have Medicare, which means that some therapists can get a rebate for their clients. And what that means is that the government gives that rebate. So, but it's only for psychologists and social workers. So those of us trained in counselling and psychotherapy aren't able to get Medicare for our clients. So I was really sort of disturbed about this, because what it means is that all GPs in the country only refer to psychology and social work. And so those of us like me who are trained in this kind of model don't ever, clients basically don't ever get a look in to art therapy, ecotherapy, psychosynthesis therapy, gestalt therapy. So it's literally just not just a psychology model. I don't mean it like that, but it's a medical model. And I was really angry about that. So I thought, oh, I'm going to write about this. So I had seen one of my colleagues had written a few blogs. I thought, oh, this is a good outlet for my anger. So that's how it kind of started. And I thought, I'm going to change the way people view counselling and psychotherapy in Australia. Because when I moved home from England, which in England it's massive over there, psychotherapy. I don't know, maybe because Freud lived in North London or something, but the psychotherapy wasn't even in the phone book here when I moved home. And so I thought, I'm going to write specifically about psychotherapy and depth psychotherapy, not pretend psychotherapy. And so that's how it sort of started. So, yeah, I channeled I'm going to put the soul back into therapy rather than this, what Yalom calls a symptom orientated, solution focused, um, uh, for symptom orientated, he calls it, 6-session therapy. Like, that's not I mean, it's therapy, but it is not psychotherapy. Psychotherapy is a lot longer than that. And so I wanted to educate the public about that. So that's how I started. Yeah.
That's amazing. No, I remember years ago I actually shared this with my podcast manager, because we talked a lot. I said years ago, one of my favorite podcasts ever was Clinton Powers, the Australian Counseling Podcast.
Oh yeah, that was Clinton Power. Yeah.
Guest on his show.
Yep. Clinton and we used to talk almost every day. And I actually thought, whatever Clinton does, I'm going to do that too. And so he was blogging, and I thought, oh, yeah, I'm going to start blogging. So,
And that's where I learned about the Medicare system and different
yeah.
things versus here. But it was just so fabulous, and I have the utmost respect for him because of what he created with that podcast. It was so educational, so wide ranging, and so shout out to Clinton if you ever listen.
Oh yeah, and actually the podcast is still there to listen to, and I still, when I do coaching, I follow up with some coaching steps afterwards, and I always include his podcast on there. Even today, I think it was, and then he moved to Ask Juliet and Clinton, and Juliet is Canadian, and she does a great job there in terms of helping people build private practice as well.
Right. So, the reason we're talking about this for some of our listeners who are, newer therapists, right? And social media marketing is the norm. But back then, even in 2012, it was not. And even for therapists to advertise themselves, to write blogs was actually very new.
Yeah.
Not completely, embraced by universities and
Yeah.
the other therapist colleagues that you would have. So this was really cutting edge to start blogging and marketing to that extent back then.
Oh, absolutely. And, even today, people, well, the problem we have now is that people would say blogging is dead. And I think, oh, you couldn't be further from the truth, because one of the things, the ways that I think about it is that you own your website like you own your home, and you rent social media space. And I've had several colleagues who have been locked out of their social media, and one of I can't remember who it was in Australia, but there was someone who had over 10,000 followers, and they couldn't get back in, and their whole business was based on, it was Instagram. Their whole business was based around their Instagram following and I know they've got another page now, but it has never been as easy to build up, because obviously as time's gone by, it's harder and harder. So for me, blogging was, it's a fantastic way to get people to your website. And as we go through the points, you'll see how that works. So, yeah, so for me, I've had a blog for 2012 we're talking about, so over 10 years. So it's obviously ranking very, very well, because the longer you have one, the better it's going to be. But for new therapists, I see all the time in Facebook groups saying, I've got no clients, I'm on Psychology Today, and then they post their website, and I think, well, where's your blog?
Right. So Jodie, I just want to slow you down for 1 second, because you just gave us so many golden nuggets here that are worth repeating. And one is, right, you own your website like you own your home, you rent social media.
Yeah,
That's really. Number two is blogging isn't dead. And when you start blogging and you continue it, right, you start ranking better. And
yeah.
then number three is, right, if the clients or the type of traffic isn't coming and you go to the website, where is your blog? So take it away from there.
Yeah, so do you want me to go through I've got 13 points of how this is useful. Would that be useful?
Yes.
Okay, so the first one is about building a strong online presence and becoming known as the go-to for your niche. So, even if you have a Google ad and just say that person ranks number one, and then you cut, because you're not paying for the ad. Like me, for example, I always rank on the first page of Google for my keyword searches. Just say you ranked above me because you've paid for an ad, and then there's me. People will still always choose me, because when they go into my website and I have a blog, they're going to connect with everything that's on there. And you might rank higher than me because you've paid for an ad, but when they get there, it's like, well, who is this person? There's no content on there. It's just your website as such. So what we want to do is to, the more you blog, the faster you're going to get to the first page of Google. It's probably a little bit harder now than back 10 years ago, but it does work, because I've just coached Karen Byman, one of my colleagues. She works with straight spouses when the partner has come out as LGBTQI. Within a year, she's got a full practice.
Wow. Wow.
And that's from blogging. So, and she's a very good example. Her niche is really quite specific. So the first thing you need to do is have a niche. It's very specific. And to me, I wrote yesterday in a post, someone was asking, I've got a client whose partner's come out as trans, and I said, I know the perfect therapist for you, because Karen is known because she's putting work blogs out there, all that kind of stuff. So it will help you become known to your colleagues. Like I am. Clinton Power used to say, eating disorders, Jodie Gale, because I used to blog about them all the time. So the second reason it's great is to network with colleagues. So I actually started my blog after a blogging challenge, and I think, I can't remember, it was someone on Psych Central, Julie, I'm having can't remember her surname, but anyway, she ran a blog challenge, and the whole lot of us every week wrote the blog that she'd put out there, and then we all shared it with each other. One of the other things that you can do is to get people to guest blog on your, like we're doing today. Like ultimately, your show notes are a blog. We just call them show notes when it's a podcast, but they function the same way a blog does. So, once you start to have people guest blog, or you're in a group, a blogging group, like anyone who purchases my blogging product, they're in my Facebook group. So you can really start to get referrals from therapists, because, every Thursday in my group, I'm happy for people to share, or like all the Marketing Monday posts. So once you start sharing your blog, people are, oh, that's Jodie. She's the one that works with trauma and eating disorders. So it becomes very easy for people to remember you.
Yeah. And then you also get more more visualization. You're seeing more, right?
Yeah,
Because maybe
yeah,
if you're just on somebody else's blog, then you get fresh eyes from their audience to,
exactly.
yeah,
Exactly. And exactly like this is working. Like, obviously you will share me and then I will share you. It's exactly the same thing as an interview, but it's a written, it's a written word. So Um, yeah, so number 3 is higher ranking on Google. So for me, it took about 6 months, and I started to notice an increase in inquiries. And after a year, I was full. And that was since 2012. I have been full ever since, with about 150 people on a wait list. So if, whenever I've got 2 spaces available at the moment, but I'm about to take extended leave, so I haven't filled those before I go away. But I know once I come back, that they will probably fill within 30 minutes. So I never have to hustle for clients. And what will happen is, for example, just say you have a niche of anxiety, you will blog about everything you blog about is from here on in is about anxiety. And so, for example, my niche, as I've mentioned, is trauma and eating disorders. So my ideal clients between 27 and 35. Every single blog I write on jodiegale.com is aimed at that client. And so when someone wakes in the night, scared that they're fat, or that they've put on weight, or that they're starving when they go to bed, and they put in counselling, eating disorder, manly, guess who's going to show up at the top of the list? Because I've blogged about that so many times that my ranking, I appear on the first page, I think, for all 3 of my websites due to blogging.
not only that, then they get to start to know you a little bit because you've already provided content. They might read
Yeah.
something, maybe, that's also a service that I think we forget, that we're also providing another way of mental health service through our
Oh,
blog.
absolutely. And for people, I've had people write to me and say, look, I'm, I mean, people like in the most faraway places, not coming for therapy, but just saying, thank you so much. The way you write about eating disorders from that spiritual perspective. I've been in 10 treatment centres and no one's ever mentioned this to me before. Some treatment centres, people have said, no one has mentioned trauma to me before. And I'm thinking, this is the underlying cause of the majority of eating disorders. So for me, I think even just reading that can change someone's opinion about themselves.
Right, absolutely. And I was going to ask you, well, your practice is already full. Why would you keep writing blogs? But I think that's the answer there. You are still serving at an even broader scope.
Oh, absolutely. And of course, I'm 52 now, and after I had a sabbatical in the pandemic. So one of my reasons that I keep blogging is which I'll go on to later and talk about, is to create a more of an online presence to start selling some courses and products and the like.
Yeah.
So they're great lead magnets for those things. But yeah, so after a year, you will see an increase in client inquiries. So, and it's for those reasons that we've just talked about, because you will start ranking higher for your keyword searches. So, what you will also do with a blog is put a call to action at the moment, at the bottom, and what you will say is something like, "Are you struggling with an eating disorder? I work from 2 offices, Manly and Allambie, and reach out if you need some support. So again, you're using your keyword searches there, which is going to bump you up, means you're going to get more client inquiries. And the other thing you mentioned about when people land as well, I work from an attachment perspective in long-term depth psychotherapy. I only take clients weekly. I build on purpose a transference with the clients. So from the minute they land on my website, they're starting to build an attachment with me.
Love that. Absolutely. Yeah, I'm an attachment-oriented therapist as well, but that's beautiful. I've never heard it articulated like that. So true.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then they reach out. I read what you said about mother-daughter relationships. Okay, so I know where we're going with this work.
Oh, I know
You
you are.
know?
So many listeners to think about actually writing, to start writing more. This is so exciting and valuable, Jodie.
Oh, absolutely. And so then, you already touched on this. It's a resource centre for clients. So for potential clients, for current clients, like I don't know about you, but sometimes you're in the session, you think, oh, I like that Janine Roth chip chocolate and raisin exercise. And I kept sending people to Janine Roth's website. And then I thought, oh, why don't I embed Janine Roth's YouTube clip into my website and send them to my website instead?
Yes,
So
exactly.
yeah, kill 2 birds with 1 stone. So what I do often when I blog is I think about, something that comes up again and again and again in my own practice. I blog about it and then I send people there instead of to external websites. So, and things like videos embedded are perfect because they keep people from a SEO perspective, they keep people on your website longer.
Right.
So embedding a podcast, embedding a video, embedding a vlog, or that is a video, I guess. Embedding something using a beautiful image, it will keep people on your page longer, and which will help Google. Oh, this person must be providing great content because people are staying longer.
Google likes that, and you're building intimacy with the consumer of it.
Oh, absolutely. And also, one of the, I don't know if is it Kristen Bell or Kirsten Bell? She does that when her therapist Jan Gray goes away on holidays. Have you seen that?
Mm.
She sings a song to her therapist because the therapist is going on holiday and she's like, having like attachment disorder sort of response, as we all do when our therapist goes away. And it gives people a feel for the type of therapist that I am when I share, and that might be off-putting to some clients. That's not the right client for me. If you want a medical model, eating disorders or a mental illness, whatever, I am not the right therapist for you. And it's very obvious on my website which means that you're not then, wading through client calls of wrong clients.
Exactly. And so we want that as a basic marketing tenet, right? To attract your ideal clients and push away the ones that aren't who you want to work with, that aren't,
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. So the next really important thing I think is to provide professional credibility. So, there's different types of posts. The way I see it, there's like connection posts. There's sometimes I think, oh, I haven't blogged for a while, so I might just do a little book review or something easy that's not going to take a lot of time. Um, and then there's your big whammy sort of lots of research sort of posts where you're really positioning yourself as an authority in the field. And they're the kind of posts that people then say, oh, I'm going to send to Jodie for eating disorder therapy. And so, one of the, if you think about it historically, magazines used to write about mental health topics. Half the time, the journalist wasn't a mental health professional. They get quotes from us, which is another way to blog. We can guest post or we can submit quotes for certain articles. But on the whole, it's about therapists really claiming their space, and we're the experts in this field. So, in my opinion, it's our job to put ourselves out there and to educate the public about these matters, not waiting for, um, you know, Joe Blogs to do it for us.
Yes. And it really was thinking about this as you've been talking. We kind of mirror back that expert to ourselves and realize as we do this work, as we do the blogging, as we solidify our niche and blog and write from our hearts, from our wisdom,
Yeah.
from our vision, right? We are then also feeling more confident as therapists, which is so important.
Oh, absolutely. And also, when you do those kind of blogs, you have to do research. And so, in my blogging prompts that I sell on Etsy, one of those is to find some current research and then blog about it. So it's actually keeping you up to date. It's like professional development in a way as well, because you're researching. I mean, for me, I left school at 14 and 9 months. And when I think about writing, I'm not a terribly, believe it or not, I'm not a great writer. So for anyone out there thinking, oh yeah, but I can't write, I used to get on there and use Grammar Girl. I had to check, is it this word or this word? I'd go back a year later and think, oh my God, there's a typo there. I read that 10 times. How can I have left that, the shame of a typo? But over time, I've become a better writer and still not perfect. These days, we were talking just before we started, I've just started running courses on using AI. And so that's really helpful for me because I write the blog post and then I put it into AI and it helps correct some grammar for me. Unfortunately, it always gives American spelling. So I have to then go back and correct it again. Um, but, there's many tips and tricks and tools that we can use in our blogging, such as AI. I don't use that to write a whole blog. I just feel that that's too generic for me. But certainly, there's certainly ways that there's lots of tips and tricks that we can use it for to help with our blogging. So,
I mean, that's such a fascinating topic for me.
yeah.
Yes, other than the terrible American spelling. But I guess kind of, Jodie, I wonder, when we're browsing the internet, we're reading these blogs, how do we even know if they're written by the author's voice or by AI? And you said blogging is not dead, but everybody knows AI is like there now. So how do we set ourselves apart as an author with an authentic voice and a real message? And maybe this is part of what you offer in your course. So
Yeah. Well, look, I think it's an ethical issue, and that's what I talk about in the course. I think it's an ethics issue. And also for me, it's an attachment issue because AI can only generate what's already out there. It can't generate something new. It's not that smart. So and basically I read somewhere, Emily Hirsch from Hirsch Marketing, so I want to reference her because this is where I read this. She said everything that's not created by AI will gain more value.
Oh, okay.
Because everyone using AI is going to be pumping out the same stuff. So for me as an attachment focused therapist, I want clients to hear my voice in my website. So if I let AI write my whole blog post for me, and sure, you can give it prompts and ideas and whatever, but it is still look, put it this way, I think if we're looking at the type of therapy that it might put out of business, it would be CBT. It's not going to be art therapy or depth psychotherapy or I don't use EMDR or anything like that, so I can't say, but it's quite solution focused generic responses to things. It's very, very useful for lots of things, but for me, I always start with my code of ethics. And so in terms of what I put in there, am I going against my code of ethics here in terms of clients? And also, do I want to feel good about myself in the world? Am I going to churn out someone else's thought? And also, it doesn't reference. So if I got that to write a full blog for me, how do I know that that doesn't belong to someone else?
Sure. Right.
And so I use it to help me generate some ideas and I use it to correct my grammar, but I wouldn't use it to write a full blog post for me. And I think you can kind of tell, you'll start to be able to tell because people will say the same thing over and over and over again because it's actually, some days I yell at it and I think, you're meant to be smart. Like, you're actually stupid.
The stilted words or language and
Exactly.
off. But I think it's so helpful and beautiful how you describe, like, working from that attachment lens. You want your clients and your readers to know you and
Yeah,
what you're, and that can only
absolutely.
be an authentic place. And the other part of your course, it just really does sound amazing and fascinating, and kind of a different approach that we can learn how to use AI to improve what we've already written or enhance it.
Yeah, and look, it's an introductory course. It's not some big fandango, 10-week course or anything like that. It just goes for a couple of hours. But for people new to AI, and also, I do see in Facebook groups, people say I write my client notes with it. And look, I've got to say, I just think if this was taken to court and they asked who wrote these client notes, would this stand up in court? I don't know. So it's not something I would use it for. And if I was to, I would absolutely be asking client permission to do that. Um, but that's a whole other stream of AI. But in terms of blogging, it's useful, but it's not the be all and end all. Would be my stance on AI and blogging. So.
Yeah, we want people to keep writing their own voices. So,
Oh, absolutely.
so
So
important.
yeah, so look, the next thing that blogging is useful for is employment opportunities. So I actually had some therapists read my blogs on eating disorders. They started a clinic in Sydney, run it was in consultation with Dr. Anita Johnston and Eating in the Light of the Moon author. And they reached out and offered me a job because they said, we love the way you think about eating disorders.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing.
The next, number 12, this one was really important for me. So the sense of power and effectiveness. So I just remember moving home to Australia with this Medicare issue thinking, oh, everyone gets Medicare. I've just studied for 8 years to be a therapist and I can't get clients because I can't give Medicare. Woe is me. And then I thought, hold on a minute. And someone actually told me people don't go for weekly depth psychotherapy anymore. It's all short-term solution focused, ACT, DBT, all the acronym therapies. And I was like, oh my God, like I've just trained in depth psychotherapy. And then excuse my language, but then I did a bit of oh, fuck you. I'm actually going to make a success out of this. And so I actually feel that writing the blog was taking responsibility for my practice and really giving it a really good go to build the kind of practice that I wanted and that I felt was therapeutically sound. So that was really important to me.
Beautiful, beautiful. It gave you the empowerment and the agency to
Yeah,
career you want. And I think it could really also help therapists who, we all struggle with imposter syndrome from time to time.
yeah.
And in a blog, again, you get reflected back your expertise, and that can be so confidence building.
Oh, absolutely. And yeah, the last one for me is really important. Shine the light on your modality. So there's no psychosynthesis training in Australia. It's very big in the UK, very big, two really big major institutes. So for me, it was about, I knew that way down the line, I might like to do some psychosynthesis training. So for me, I was always writing from a psychospiritual perspective. And for me, that really stemmed from, I remember when I had my eating disorder, going to the GP and the way I was treated and pathologized, I just, I just felt it was so lacking. And luckily for me, I found a psychosynthesis psychotherapist who had recovered from anorexia herself, my beautiful first therapist, Penny. And For me, it was about really shining the light on this beautiful modality that I just feel, psychosynthesis therapists, we feel so passionate about psychosynthesis. And for me, it was around writing about my passion as well. And also for people who have maybe been in 10, 12, 14 treatment centres, actually, you are not the problem, because young girls, I think, hold the problem of the family. They're then pathologized and told they're the problem and their eating disorder is the problem. Their eating disorder is the coping mechanism. And so I wanted to shine the light on that and the way that I worked. And I think for people, whether it's DBT, whether it's EMDR, whether it's, like me, psychospiritual, it's great to educate the public about these things.
Yeah. And just the depth of the impact of trauma that's involved with the eating disorder for the individual, for the family,
Yeah,
generationally, it just really comes through as you describe that. How wonderful
absolutely.
therapist that was able to help you so much and share with you, right? Clearly there was that attachment. That was so.
Absolutely. And I must say, the reason she was so fantastic is I'd actually had a peak spiritual experience swimming with a wild dolphin in Ireland. His name was Fungi. And when I took that to therapy, because I'd had this peak experience and I thought I had this experience of, at the time I was also using recreational drugs for a very long time. So I had this natural high. So I was doing nature therapy way before I even did nature therapy. I took Fungi to the therapy and I said, I've had this experience and I don't know what to make of it. And so what she used to do was she used to bring Fungi into the sessions and say things like, would Fungi worry about what he ate? And I was like, of course he doesn't. Or would Fungi worry about what he looks like, about being too fat? And I'd say, oh, don't be silly. Of course he doesn't worry about things like that. So she was using Fungi, what we call in psychosynthesis, an external unifying center, or what we would probably say now as a co-regulator, until I trusted her enough to start trusting her. Yeah. So very skilled therapist.
And thank you so much for sharing that with us. That's just so profound that you had that peak spiritual experience and then it was used for your healing even further. So
Absolutely. And actually, two of my I've guest. So we'll talk about guest posting a little bit. So you can then go on and guest post for other people. So Recovery Warriors, I've submitted 2 posts, and one of them was about how I healed my eating disorder by having a peak spiritual experience swimming with Fungi the dolphin. So I've used my lived experience in blogging quite a lot as well, which some people are a little bit hesitant about, but in the eating disorder world, I think lived experience goes a long way in terms of helping other people recover. So, and I always think about, is this in service of the client or the reader? And going from there.
well, and your lived experience is giving that authentic voice to your blog and to what you're sharing, and those are the readers and clients you want to attract.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Wow. Well, this has been amazing to get these tips. We're going to include everything in the show notes, but I just am excited myself to think about blogging. I clearly have a website with some very old blogs. So I guess that's a question. Like, can you just start again? Is that okay? Just like start up again?
Absolutely. Look, I've got one blog that I've rehashed about 5 times.
Mm.
And so it was one that I did for the blog challenge. So it was one of my very first blogs, so 10 years ago. And it was something about finding value, meaning, and purpose in life. And I think I wrote originally about it was about how to overcome adversity. And so I used people like Viktor Frankl. What's his name? I can't remember now. Anyway, famous people who have had crises and have overcome them. When the pandemic hit, I changed it, updated it to be relevant for the pandemic. Now that the pandemic's, it's actually not over, but now that it's not in that crisis phase, I will probably go back and update it again, I've kept the same URL, but I've updated the links. I've got a list of books about overcoming on the blog there, so I might update that with a couple of new books. Google loves fresh content, and so I often go back and check all the links that they're not broken, because that's not good when someone clicks on them. And if you haven't written for a while, you basically just start again, and then you send your mailing list and say, hey, I bet you've been wondering where I've been. And here's my blog. And that's the thing that you do. You need to post your blog somewhere. So you need a mailing list. You send your mailing list your blogs, and you nurture your mailing list before you try and sell them something. So, for example, I've got an inner child course coming up for my Trauma Warriors site and Psychosynthesis. So one for therapists, one for the public. Every blog I write this year is on the inner child, and they're a lead magnet to lead into selling my courses.
Right. The blog magnet. You don't have to create something new.
No, you nurture your mailing list with a blog every couple of weeks, like blog, sell.
This is gold.
You can't just decide I want to sell a course and not be doing anything before that. I mean, that's why courses don't fill, not because you're not a good therapist, or not because you're not a good course creator. Your courses don't sell because you haven't nurtured your audience and led into them by nurturing them with something like a blog.
So great. So great. That's just amazing advice. And I know my listeners are going to want to learn more from you, Jodie, because you're fun, you're inspiring, you're real.
Yeah.
These steps in like really simple, accessible ways. Like I already feel inspired and I have a million other things to do, but oh, you mean I can just write the blog and send it out? Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, blogging, people often ask, a blog or a podcast? Surely podcasts are more sort of trendy these days. Look, I did a podcast for 2 years, and look at us. I was up at 5:30 this morning. I had to do that all the time when I was podcasting. A blog, you can sit down, write a few words, come back to it later. It's actually not as labor intensive as a podcast, in my opinion. So I take my hat off to you for getting on the podcast train. But yeah, for me, it's a lot easier to come, when I've got 5 minutes here, 5 minutes there. So yeah, absolutely.
Yes. Well, and so we have taken some very early morning weekend time from you, and I really appreciate you coming here and sharing your expertise on blogging and your wisdom as a therapist and as a human and someone who leads from the heart with my audience. Thank you so much, Jodie, and I really acknowledge you for the tremendous work you're doing. Anybody who pops onto your website will see the reach and the effort that you put in to healing and making a difference in this world. So thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Yeah, that website that you're talking about is psychosynthesis.online. So that's my website for therapists. So yeah, come on over.
Yeah, psychosynthesis.online. And then is that where everyone can also find your courses on the blogging products?
Yes, there is a page on there. It's probably easier to go there. I can't remember what the page title's called, but it might say shop or something like that. But yes, you can see my AI for therapists. And I've got 2 blogging products, which are fantastic. The first one's 52 blogging prompts, but it's so much more than that. And the second one is actually a calendar of, it says 365 days of awareness, therapy awareness days, but there's actually over 900 days. And so what I do is use that for blogging inspiration. So just say today is National Depression Day. I would be a few weeks ago thinking about what kind of blog am I going to write about depression. So because I work with eating disorders, I'd write about depression and eating disorders. And then I would post it with National Depression Day hashtag. And so there's 900 events on there that you could use for blogging inspiration. So they're my 2 main blogging products. So
Wow, indispensable. And look at how simply Jodie made that, right? Because she knows her niche, which is eating disorders, then she just blogs about eating disorders with depression because it's National Depression Day. And so it
Yeah.
really a structure so that you don't feel completely overwhelmed.
Oh, even things like, I think there's chocolate cherry pie day or something. I could even weave that into a blog with eating disorders.
Well, and so for listeners, also Jodie has given us a special discount. And if you enter HEART25, that's HEART 25, you'll get a discount on the 2 blogging products. So we'll link all of that in the show notes. And I just want to thank you again. And I can't wait to check out these blogging products. They sound amazing and would love to maybe invite you back when we can find some time and talk about eating disorders and trauma work too.
Yeah, fantastic. I'd love to. Thank you so much for having me. This has been really fun. And, we were just saying beforehand, I'm actually off to Canada and the US in actually 4 days, and I'll be driving right past where you live.
I'll wave for sure. It's just been such a pleasure and a delight. Everybody check out psychosynthesis.online and Jodie Gale. Thank you so much.
Thank you.